So let's start the first panel. Now I am going to use English to facilitate an informal dialogue among the panelists, not only presentations, but I will invite them to interact, if that's the case. Once each of the panelists make its remarks, we will go to the next one, but provided that there are not questions, and if there are no questions during the presentation, that will give us a little bit of time at the end for questions from the public to any of the panelists. The idea of this panel is to think about not only the challenges of sustainable development, but specifically the situation of the South, the countries. The title of the panel is Sustainable Development and Challenges Ahead. Can the South do it alone? So to start, I will invite Franco Frattini, which is the president de la Société Italienne pour l'Organisation Internationale, ancien commissaire européen de justice et des affaires extérieures, ancien ministre des Affaires étrangères et italien. Vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much to my old and dear friend Mohamed Ben Issa pour l'invitation. Je peux dire ici à Assilah, c'est la deuxième fois pour moi et cher Mohamed, je te remercie, j'admire toujours ton impulsion politique, culturelle très forte. Moving to English, I would say this is once again a good opportunity to talk about extremely burning issues in very few minutes, since tomorrow morning I'll be again speaking but about the role of United Nations. I'll say a few words on trying to respond to this very interesting question. Is the South capable to do it alone? So what about relations between the North and the South on addressing sustainable development, but not only that, climate change, mass migration, or exploitation of natural resources, all the topics that the introductory speakers touched upon. I would start from the end. My answer is not. The South is unable and should not do it alone. Unable for a reason which is, for me, a sad reality. I'll be a bit frank. The global governance, first of all, the one based on UN system, is tailored for the richer and the most powerful countries. There is the underrepresentation in the global governance system of the poorer countries, and this is why I think the moment is, as my friend Vuk Jeremic just said, to reform United Nations. So this is one reason, depending on the global governance system, particularly United Nations. The second reason why I say no is that if you talk about climate change or how to address mass migration, there is a shared interest between the South and the North. Nobody can imagine that only the South addressing these burning issues will solve the global problems. It is in our interest. I speak as Italian, I speak as Mediterranean, I speak as European. It is in our common interest to address together all these kind of issues. The third reason why I'm saying no is maybe for me personally, the most important one. because the North, the richer part of the world, bears a moral duty to support, to help, to encourage the poorer regions in the world because of historical reasons of exploitation, of colonization, of inequalities, disparities, full exploitation of land and water from the richer regions in the world. This is why we cannot leave alone the South on addressing together all these issues. But unfortunately, this cooperation, this that I would call, I would say, equal partnership between the North and the South doesn't work, does not exist, I would say. I'm a bit pessimistic, but being strongly pro-European, looking at my Europe in this hugely divided points of view, I became rather pessimistic. So there is not yet a real cooperation between the South and the North. I take very briefly 3 titles. I will not elaborate, of course, I have no time. Migration. Take migration. The North, including Europe, the Western countries, continue to consider migration mainly as a securitarian issue instead of considering that promoting local development, investing in the younger generation living in the south of Mediterranean or in Africa can be a great opportunity for both North and South. But this is the old approach. Rich countries give money to the South and poor countries are just recipient countries. No cooperation, no equal partnership. The same applies to the second example that I want to give you, to propose to you, the exploitation of natural resources. We heard some previous speakers talking about the importance of balanced and sustainable use of natural resources. Unfortunately, we look at the situation as it is now. Some powerful countries, some rich countries, not only Western but Asian countries, you will understand what I'm talking about, are occupying, are buying land in African countries, taking the opportunities of weak and often corrupted governments in these states as if these states were on sale. But the result is to impoverish these countries at the benefit of the buyer, of the owners. This is why also on that second key issue, land and water, there is no cooperation, not enough cooperation between North and South. The third example I want to propose to you how to reinterpret aid for development strategies. Aid for development, having been Vice President of European Commission that spend a lot of money for aid, but today still unfortunately this is seen as charity policy, not as it should be, as a common business opportunity to encourage microcredit, small and medium enterprises in poorer countries to promote local economy. What we used to do, unfortunately, we used to promote, I would say, brain drain by managing migration instead of promoting local development. These are three examples. What are the solutions? We have no time now to solve all these problems, but I have one suggestion. We are living through key time for Europe. Europe is changing all its institutions. President of European Commission is still there, President Juncker. You will have to decide and to form the new team, the European Commission. I think a very good news would be President Juncker appointing a commissioner for Mediterranean. Why not? Not just a commissioner for immigration, as he says, not just a commissioner for neighborhood, but a commissioner to promote an integrated approach, economy, security, human development, migration, culture in Mediterranean. This would be a political sign. And my conclusion is, to do all this, we need political leadership. If we take the excuse the crisis, as Miguel Angel, my friend Miguel Angel Moratinos said, yes, the crisis is there, but we cannot take the crisis as an excuse for isolation and to say, okay, the South, we will be thinking about that later. We will have to think about it now. Otherwise, we all will be paying a heavy price. And this is the situation to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to you. The first answer we receive is no. The South cannot do it alone. But you argue in favor of a new partnership or a real partnership, equal partnership. I think it is a topic that we could do a little bit of follow-up. But let me be provocative. Let me add to that, does it imply a redefinition of the responsibilities of South and North? The principle of common but differentiated responsibilities have normally divided the South and the North. And I think that principle no longer should be interpreted that way, but should be interpreted as accepting that there are different responsibilities both within the North countries and the South countries. And then we will be able to build a real partnership. But let's see what other panelists have to say about these topics and new proposals and ideas. The next speaker would be Marcus Kyprianou, vice-président du Parti démocrate de Chypre, ancien ministre des Affaires étrangères, ancien commissaire européen, membre du comité consultatif du Centre des relations internationales et de développement durable.
Thank you. And I would like first to begin by thanking our friend Mohamed Ben Isa for the hospitality and the invitation. It's my first time to be here in Assilah and Tangier, and I have to say it's a beautiful city, it's a beautiful country, and I think already the debate we're having, and we'll have tomorrow as well, will be very interesting. And I will begin also by answering the question, and my answer will be no as well. No, the South cannot do it on its own. But then again, no one else can do it on their own either. And at the same time, nobody should do it on their own. So, and why is that? Because it's a global challenge, it's a global problem. It's an issue of humanity, one can say, and therefore it is the responsibility and the obligation of the whole international community to deal with it. Now, of course, we come to the issue of responsibility, mentioned already, and where we can put the blame. Yes, we can put the blame on the North. But to be honest with you, I don't think this is enough of an incentive for the North, for the region countries to act. And at the same time, I don't want this to become the excuse the justification for the South for not acting. As I said, everybody has to act and have to act together. And I wouldn't rely very much on the policies of the Western world, of the North, to be based on morality and moral responsibility. I would rather do it because it's in their own interests. I like to be a little cynical in this. Therefore, what has to be pointed out is that it's in the interest of both North and South to deal with this problem, no matter who has the bigger or the smaller responsibility. And I'd like to use a phrase I used on a different occasion when I was European Commissioner. It's not an issue of charity, it's an issue of self-defense. But of course, the fact remains that action needs to be taken, and this action needs to be taken collectively. And we need all states, international organizations, there will be more discussion on that tomorrow, specialized agencies, regional organizations. We must not underestimate the importance and the value and the added value of regional organizations. They'll have to act jointly, collectively, together, efficiently and effectively, and result-oriented, so they will have an approach that produces results. In other words, let's talk more action. Then one will say, if we all agree and so obvious and so clear, why are we still discussing it? Well, the fact is that, as always, there are some important obstacles. One, the most difficult one, is the political will that is needed to prioritize this as a policy. And on this, if I can list of things that have to be done by everyone, especially the leaders of the world and the countries, is first of all to understand and accept that there is a problem. You know, the known saying, unless you admit to have a problem, then you will never deal with it. So we have to first of all admit to the existence of the problem. Then recognize the challenges and the solutions that exist. And we do have solutions. We've been hearing about them all this time because we have the technology and we have the knowledge. Then accept the reality that everybody must act and abandon a fatalist approach that nothing can be done, there's no reversing of this problem, or someone else should do it. On the contrary, we have to accept that, and that's what I said earlier, that we shouldn't get caught into the blame game by saying that someone else should act, someone else should do it, those who create should solve the problem, because that cannot be done anymore. Morally, that would be the right thing, but this cannot be done anymore unless we act all collectively. And of course, we have to accept the principle that the contribution, the actions, and the initiatives will have to be according to the abilities, the competences, the needs, and the effects, the effectiveness of those who take the initiative. And abandon, I'll go back to that, I feel a bit strongly about this, that's why I keep repeating it. Abandon the self-justifying approach, or excuse if you like, that we didn't cause it, then why should we deal with it? For the simple reason that nowadays, where we've reached the point where we have reached, it affects everyone. And we have to understand, in order to grasp this, we have to understand that the dangers and the risks that exist from doing nothing, and the negative effects will affect everybody, that includes the South, and at the same time, the benefits of solving the problem, of dealing with it, of meeting the challenges, will benefit everybody. The Sustainable Development Goals have to become a political priority. And as my friend Frank Frattini was telling me today when we're discussing this issue, it has to become a priority for the next generation, not till the next elections. Because unfortunately, and I'm a politician, many of us are here, politicians and leaders always look till the next elections. So they have these short-term goals, goals that bring votes. Here we have to reverse this. We have to have a priority, a goal that goes beyond the next and the next and the next election, that may not help those who set the goal to profit politically immediately, but the country and the world, when it comes to that, will benefit from that. We need international cooperation and action that goes beyond summits and conferences and debates and discussions. As I said earlier, we have already the goals. We know, and we know what needs to be done. The thing is, and that's the challenge, to actually do it. Stop talking about it and actually start doing it. And of course, combined with this is to abandon the false belief that if we go to a conference and if we adopt a resolution and if we adopt a paper and we set some goals, we've done our duty, and then let someone else deal with those goals. It has to become a priority for every state, every leader, every organization, small or big, north or south, to actually proceed with that. How do we achieve that? And as I said earlier, I would like to give, as a politician, give a more political approach. We need to create national and local public opinion. We know this is the driving force. We have to be honest about this. This is the driving force behind the actions of politicians. What the people want, what the voters want. So through information and education, if we create the public opinion, strong public opinion in this respect, this will affect, will guide the leaders, and then the leaders, of course, will guide all the initiatives and the international action that needs to be taken. So, having said all that, I would just like to summarize, in conclusion, that the South cannot do it alone, but should not be left alone to do it either. That at the same time, the South should not wait passively for someone else to solve the problems, because even though, and I admit to that, I recognize that it's not their fault, they do suffer from that as well. They are not saviors anymore. Everybody has to help himself and all of us together. And of course, in other words, and I just gave you the long roundabout answer to a very simple question, and I think the punchline is that this has to become a global commitment. It's a global problem. Sustainable development has to become the global solution. And that can be done only we all act together, jointly, collectively, North and South together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcos. Well, the South cannot and should not do it alone. That's, I think, an important message. And I think the message also on implementation and working together is something that we can do some follow-up, how to do it, and then the notion of equity. I think it is a relevant one, because if we are going to act together, we need to do it in accordance to our own capacities, each of us, assuming that there are many differences between countries. But let's follow with a presentation by Christopher Fomieux, directeur Afrique de la NDI, which is the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs. He's the founder and president of this NDI.
Thank you very much, Honorable Moderator. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I would like to, as the previous speakers, thank His Excellency Mohamed Benazir for this wonderful opportunity to participate in this very distinguished Assilah Forum, and also for the co-sponsoring organization CISD, and for their wonderful staff, because the staff has worked very diligently to get all of us here, and we're very thankful for that. I also really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation in 2014, because as you all will remember, 2015 was the deadline set for the Millennium Development Goals. And I think when we talk about sustainable development, we have to try to situate the discussion within the context of the Millennium Development Goals that were adopted at the United Nations by all member states and accepted and supported by organizations around the world. So it's probably, in my opinion, very timely to go back to the principles that underscore the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the seventh objective of the 8 objectives that are laid out in the document on the Millennium Development Goals. And to say that sustainable development, the purpose is to assure an environment in which humanity can live comfortably, and that it's sustained by 4 targets. The first target is to integrate the principles and policies and programs, national programs, that would reverse the current tendency to misuse natural resources. The second target is to reduce by half, at least 50%, the percentage of populations around the world that do not have access to water, potable water. And the third target is to reduce the losses in biodiversity. And we have seen the impact of the consequences of the degradation of biodiversity around the world. There was earlier reference to earthquakes, natural disasters that have been experienced by countries around the world, which underscore the point that by 2010, there was a general recognition that the benchmark on biodiversity had not been met. And fortunately, though, that continues to be one of the priorities of the United Nations system. The fourth target in laying out this principle on sustainable development as one of the Millennium Development Goals was to sensitize the world as a whole to make sure that by 2020, so in 5 or 6 years' time, at least 100 million people would be lifted out of poverty, especially in the people who live in the bidonvilles or who have very degradable habitation conditions. So those are the 4 principles that capture the spirit of this main objective in the Millennium Development Goals. When you look specifically at the concept of sustainable development, it's supposed to be sustained by 3 main pillars. One is the economic efficiency in the utilization of resources. 2 is to reduce the issues of equitable or social inequities, the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And thirdly, is to look at the quality of the environment in which we live. Of course, as we know so well, today's world in the 21st century is a global village, and we are our best when we are brothers' keepers. There are 4 principles that underline or sustain or support these 3 pillars. The first principle is the principle of solidarity amongst people, amongst countries, and amongst generations, so that our generation, this generation, can use the resources that we have in an equitable fashion, but then also guarantee that we'll have something left for future generations. The second principle is the precautions that we need to take in decision-making in order to avoid natural catastrophes and other risks of health or to the environment. That is why, for example, when we had the incidents of industries or companies in the Northern Hemisphere disposing of toxic waste in countries in the Southern Hemisphere, that was unacceptable behavior because it underpinned or undercut the principle of a judicious utilization of resources in order not to expose the global population to health disasters and other catastrophes. The third principle is the principle of participation in terms of the responsibilities for each and every one of us, irrespective of their profession or of their social standing, to be able to make a contribution to us attaining or achieving the goals of sustainable development. And the last or fourth and last principle is the individual and collective responsibility that is incumbent upon all of us, individuals, major companies, multinationals, civil society, and the media, to try to sensitize the world on this issue of sustainable development. That is why there is a principle that allows industries that are considered pollutants to be taxed at a higher rate because of the damage that they cause. This was adopted way back by OECD in 1972 and was one of the first acts to be adopted by Europe in 1986. So with this background, very briefly, I now come to the second part of our question. I didn't want to give an obvious no, because I would have led the moderator to see that he's probably going to have a unanimous panel. But I thought that if I went through the principles that underscore the notion of sustainable development as it's been embraced as one of 8 Millennium Development Goals, then the answer would become very obvious to all of you. I do not think that countries of the South should go it alone. I do not think that we should even expect them to go it alone. I do not think that they should be asked to go it alone. And I'll give you just 2 simple reasons for my line of argument. One is that a lot of the challenges that we face around the world today, especially in the areas of sustainable development, global warming, climatic change, deforestation, further desertification, especially in the Sahel for the countries in the Mediterranean as well as in sub-Saharan Africa, that a lot of these challenges are of a transnational nature. They go beyond the borders of each one country, and it would be extremely difficult to expect each country to deal with the challenges on a bilateral level. I live in Washington, and in the past few months, the political debate in Washington on the issue of immigration has gotten very heated because of the hundreds of thousands of young people, including kids, that are migrating illegally from countries, some of the countries in Latin America, across the border into the United States. And yes, there can be talk about crime or political persecution, but I would just say that one of the reasons for this wave of illegal immigration has to do with the lack of sustainable development in some of their countries of origin. Secondly, I would say that the social inequities or inequalities that exist and just questions of survival in some of the countries of the South make it extremely difficult to expect that the countries of the South would be able to mobilize the technological know-how as well as the resources that are expected to counter some of these new threats. Lest we forget some of the mishaps that face developing countries today, whether you're talking about conflict, armed conflict, have the environment and sustainable development as collateral damage. I think at a very basic level, at the family, in the village, in a remote part of Africa, that doesn't have access to gas or other modern technology that can facilitate their cooking habits, and that then feels compelled to cut down trees and the forests in order to survive. Biodiversity is a priority for the world, and I think that it will require a collective effort to make this happen.
Thank Thank you.
In the saying, and an old saying that many of you or some of you may relate to, this is a global challenge, and I will end by saying, countries of the world, unite. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much for reminding us the principles are not going directly into the unanimous decision with which we will end by saying that we should not do it alone, we cannot do it alone, countries of the South. But let me go back to a provocation. We are talking about South as if it was a single unit. And South includes economies which are very big and very powerful, includes knowledge and technology, includes differences between countries which may be as big or bigger than between some of them and the developed countries. So can we introduce that element of diversity within the South? Let me start with Peter Steen-Muller, président de la Commission des Affaires étrangères et ancien ministre des Affaires étrangères de Danemark.
Thank you, and thank you, Benaisa, for inviting me. It's also for me the first time that I am here, and I think it's very interesting. The place is wonderful, the area is wonderful, and it's a great pleasure for us, my wife and I, to be here and be your guest, Benaisa. And I had some notes, but during our coffee break, my notes disappeared. But I think I can remember what I think. Nobody can go it alone. Somebody tries. Nobody can do it alone. The world trade is necessary. And if you're not part of the world trade, if you fall out of that, you become a failed state. So of course nobody can do it alone, and so the South cannot do it alone. But which South are we talking about? There's not one South. There are very many Souths, and they're very different. For instance, when you now try to construct a parallel system to the United Nations, to the Bretton Woods system, that's the BRICS countries. And there you have three southern countries, India, Brazil, South Africa. But their situation is not the same as the one in Mali or in Cambodia. So we're not talking about the same. The situation and the challenges are different between Southeast Asia, which is south, and Africa south of the Sahel, which is south. They are in different situations. In Southeast Asia, can Afghanistan do it alone? Well, we hope we can do better alone, but can they? We'll know that after 2014. And if Afghanistan falls to the Taliban, what will happen to Pakistan? Can Pakistan stand if Afghanistan falls? Must the world enter once more, or do we expect them to do it alone? United Nations doesn't do anything. That will be discussed tomorrow, and Vuk made a very good address about its last call for United Nations because it doesn't work. So regional institutions, organizations have to take over. You have regional organizations here in Africa, north, south, east, west, but also the African Union, which has done very many good things, but which has not been able to solve the latest problems. Then in the south you have the Arab Peninsula. It's not the same as Africa. They're doing it alone. They're killing each other quite alone now. And now we are asked, when do you come in to stop it? If we go in, we'll be damned a year after. If we don't go in, we'll be damned because we didn't do it. I met some Arab ambassadors a couple of years ago, and they asked me, when do you go into Syria? And then I said to the Arab ambassadors, well, after you, gentlemen, after you. Because the South must take some responsibility for itself more than they have done and used to. The Shia and Sunni conflict, how can we in the outer world influence that? We cannot. They have been killing each other for 1,300 years. And as the Qatar Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs said to me when we just discussed that someday in Doha, they said, you can't do anything about it. They will continue in 100 and 200 years more, and then perhaps they have finished. You can't do anything. So there they do it alone. Where is the Middle East Quartet? Where is Tony Blair, who gets his salary every month to make peace in the Middle East? Perhaps he should pay his salary back. And where is the Arab League? The Arab League calls upon us. In 2005, the Secretary General of the Arab League said to me, next time let us do it. Well, next time is now. When does the Arab League do anything? So they can't do it. They can't do it alone, but they are trying, not even trying to. Then we have Africa. That situation is different too. Are we talking about north of Sahel or south of Sahel? The situation is different. The challenges are different. The climate change impact will become different. There you must look upon the demography. There will be 900 million more Africans south of Sahel between now and 2035. We have to find jobs for 900 million people south of Sahel, otherwise they will immigrate or become poor. And if they immigrate, they will pass Sahel and go into your country, Maghreb. But Maghreb cannot absorb them because in Maghreb you will get 100 million more, which you have to find jobs to. So you can't have those 900 million coming into Maghreb, so you'll send them on to Europe. Gibraltar and Spain and Mauritania is just on the other side of the strait. But Europe is closed. So you are stuck with them here and your societies will break down. What is the answer to that? Because Africa is a special problem in demography. Let us, of course, create work, create production, and then have a possibility to export it, which means free trade arrangements. We try through the WTO, we try in the Doha round, but fail. But then Europe and Africa should form a free trade area, because otherwise Europe has either to pay them coming to Europe or pay for their merchandises. So the answer is, for Africa, a green revolution, because you have to have trade, you have to have production, you have to be able to export it, otherwise you can't find occupation for those 900 plus 100 which are coming into your countries between now and 20 years forward. That means more production, which will create more CO2, which will create more climate disasters. And if you get a climate disaster here in Africa, some part of Africa, there the soil will vanish with the wind because it's a drought. Other parts of Africa, the flood will bring the fertile soil into the ocean. So there will be no agriculture anymore. And that means starvation, and then more than 900 million people walking through Sahel up to Maghreb, where you will try to send them on to Europe, which is closed. So the answer is only a trade, production, but in a sustainable way, which means a green revolution, which means technology transfer. We tried that on COP15, we failed. We have to be able to do it in COP20, which has been mentioned, I think, by Vuk. COP20 has to be a success for what concerns the Fund for Africa, the transfer of technology, and I agree with Franco, the European Union, the African Union should, in all these matters, work more closely together, and a good idea would be that commissioner. We have 28 commissioners and we can't find work for 28 commissioners. So here it will be possible to find meaningful work to one commissioner. And we have to strengthen the geopolitical cooperation between Africa and the European Union. So there are answers to it, but the answers will be different from area to area and from region to region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last panelist is Sabat Al-Juna, professeur adjoint de la gestion des ressources hydriques, chercheur de l'environnement dans les pays du CCG. Vous avez la parole, madame.
اوكي مرحبا مرة ثانية. ببتدي المداخلة مالتي بثلاثة أسئلة تعقيبا على اوكي ببتدي مداخلتي بثلاثة أسئلة أساسية تعقيبا على ما ذكره الأفاضل الكرام. في هالمرحلة هل نستطيع كدول جنوب أن نترك لوحدنا في مرحلة التصدي لآثار التغيرات المناخية والوصول إلى أهداف الألفية الإنمائية والتنمية المستدامة؟ أغلب الدول الجنوب باعتقادي لا تستطيع الوصول منفردة في هذا الجانب. الثاني السؤال هو هل تستطيع أن تسلك دول الجنوب طريقها بدون مساعدات؟ أغلب دول الجنوب إذا ما ميزنا دول الجنوب إلى نوعين كما تفضل أحد المشاركين، اللي بدأت تأخذ طريقها والوصول إلى دول تقارب وتشابه دول الشمال. إذن وما هي البدائل المتاحة التي يجب أن تحل محل ما تفتقت عنه اتفاقية تغير المناخ الأولى حول المسؤولية المشتركة ولكن المتباينة؟ هل هناك ستحدث مراجعات خلال مؤتمر باريس في 2015؟ أخذا في الاعتبار أن كثير من دولنا لا زالت تعتمد على مساعدات دولية وأممية في الجانب، ولا نستطيع فصل التنمية المستدامة وأهداف الألفية عن آثار تغيرات المناخ المتلاحقة كما نرى، والتي تأثيرها أكثر وضوحا في دول الجنوب عن دول الشمال. إذا نظرنا إلى مستقبل البشرية، أنا باعتقادي دول الشمال حاليا في مراجعات مختلفة عن آثار تغير المناخ. سابقا كنا احنا نفهم تغير المناخ على أن أغلب الآثار السلبية ستكون على الجنوب، ولكن اتضح خلال 5 إلى 7 سنوات الماضية أن هناك الكثير من الآثار السلبية بدأت تضرب الكثير من دول الشمال، وواضحة معالمها خلال ال5 سنوات الأخيرة. فهناك عندنا ضعف عام في التنبؤ بماذا يمكن أن يحدث من تغيرات واسعة. التنبؤات جدا بسيطة، لازلنا في مجال أن احنا نستطيع أن ندقق ونصل بالتنبؤ بدرجات الاحترار العالمي، ندرة الموارد، ارتفاع أسعار المواد الغذائية، زيادة الطلب على الطاقة، تدهور الموارد الطبيعية. ولكن الكثير من العوامل أخفقت الكثير من المؤسسات العالمية والجامعية والكثير من المهتمين، وليس فقط في الجنوب إنما حتى في الشمال، بالتنبؤ فيها مثل انهيار الأنظمة العالمية، تصدع الأمن العالمي، ومثل ما سمعنا ولا زالت مشكلة تؤرق الشمال حاليا في الوصول إلى حلول لها في مشكلة الشرق الأوسط أو بعض الأزمات اللي موجودة في أفريقيا ولا في آسيا، وأبسطها حاليا التقاتل كما طرح مثالا الشيعي والسني في هذه المرحلة في منطقتنا في الشرق الأوسط. كذلك لا تستطيع الكثير من المؤسسات أن هي تتأكد أو تراجع مسألة انتشار الأمراض الوبائية مثل ما حدث حاليا في أفريقيا كمرض إيبولا وتأثيرات الواسعة، زيادة المشكلة الحديثة اللي قد تكون هي مجتمعية ولكن لها تأثير كثير بتغيرات المناخ، تمرد وثورات الشباب التي أصبحت واسعة وليست فقط مرتبطة بالشرق الأوسط، وما سمعنا تؤرق عملية الهجرة النازحين إلى أوروبا والدول الأخرى، فما بالكم بنازحي التغيرات المناخية والذين سيزدادون إذا ما ظلينا على بدون وجود اتفاقية تراعي ماذا سيحدث من كارثة. أنا باعتقادي جاية من دولة جزرية صغيرة مثل دولة البحرين، أستطيع أن أقول أنه يجب أن لا تترك الدول التي مثل في مستوى دولنا لحالها في هالمرحلة، يجب أن يكون في هناك اهتمام واضح من الاتجاهين عالميا وأمميا أن تساعد دول الجنوب بشكل واسع، خصوصا الدول التي في حاجة إلى مراجعات. ولكن هذه لا يعني أن دولنا أن تأخذ بالزمام المبادرة وتراجع الكثير من أسس بنائها وأهدافها. أولها التعليم. احنا التعليم أنا باعتقادي لا زال في هناك مراجعة حتى يربط بما يحدث حاليا من تطورات على مستوى العالم. ثانيا احنا محتاجين إلى نقل التكنولوجيا وتوطينها، وهذا لا زال في يد الشمال حتى لو نتكلم عن احنا صار لنا 20 ل 30 سنة نتحكي عن اتفاقيات، ولا زال توطين التكنولوجيا عندنا في دولنا مربوط بشكل واسع في يد متنفذين وشركات على مستوى عالمي. إذا ماذا نحتاج نحن كدول في الجنوب؟ وإذا أبغى يتكلم عن الدول العربية مثالا، أنا باعتقادي تفعيل الشراكات الإقليمية في منطقتنا قد تلعب دور. يعني إذا تكلمنا عن مجلس التعاون الخليجي، إذا تكلمنا عن المجلس المقاربي، إذا تكلمنا عن جامعة الدول العربية، يجب أن تكون هي تعمل بشكل واسع خلال المرحلة القادمة لتفرض شروطها. لتفرض شروطها بما معناه أنها تكون كقوة مثل ما عملت بعض دول جنوب في أمريكا اللاتينية ولا جنوب شرق آسيا، أصبح تأخذ لها دور واعتبار في هذا الجانب، وإلا لن يكون لنا دور إحنا كدول عربية في فرض شروط محددة. كل دول ستنظر إلى ما يهمها، فدول الشمال تنظر إلى اهتماماتها والتأثيرات القادمة عليها. إذا تفعيل الشراكات المجتمعية في التصدي لكثير من التغيرات سيكون هو ذو بعد مهم. وشكرا.
Thank you very much to you, and thank you for bringing back also the South-South cooperation dimension and all the updates on the findings on the topic. But in order to allow the public to participate, I will refrain from comments unless there is a question among the panelists themselves first that we could address. If not, can I ask if there are questions in the room or comments to the presentations that we heard? No, apparently. Everybody's satisfied. So let me just conclude by thanking our panelists for their presentation. I think it was more or less obvious we will have a unanimous conclusion that the South cannot, the South should not. But I think it was also very important to see how the South should act and contribute and how new partnerships should be built and South-South and cooperation and even a different way of addressing North-South cooperation are the topics for discussion. Tomorrow we will continue with the role of the UN in particular. It was said here that the UN is not working, at least not properly. I will challenge that tomorrow. Because I think it is going to be very important. I think that could be one of the contributions of this forum to make sure that we can make full use of the UN because we have no other option. So we will have to make it work. So let me conclude with this and thank you all of you, participants and public in general.